SH sound. It's a sheen or a sin, seen, and that's a tav. So there's two letter T sounds. That's a tav, that's a tet. There's two S sounds. That's a somic, and that's a seen or a sheen. And there's a couple hard K sounds. That's the letter K, and that's the letter Q. So if you think, why do we have that? Why do we have two K sounds? It's confusing. So you might get somebody like Gaddafi, right, the leader of Libya. Sometimes you see his name spelled with a Q and sometimes with a K. I mean, which is it? Well, it doesn't matter. It's just English phonetics. In English, it just doesn't matter. So you can see the word Kadesh, like the Ruach HaKodesh. Well, it's spelled sometimes with a K, maybe with a Q. Doesn't matter. It's phonetic. It makes all the difference in the world. Every single Hebrew word is spelled exactly for a reason. The tav is a T sound, so is the tet. So you can say, well, it doesn't matter, whichever one you want, it's just phonetic. Huge difference. It makes all the difference which letter you use. The same with the S, the same with the kuf or the kaf. The kaf is where we get our letter K, and this is the kuf. Now I'll go into the meanings of the letters, which will tell you why, because the way a letter is spelled is what it means. So the word kadesh, or kadosh, ruach hakadosh, kadesh, is spelled with the Q, or the kuf. Okay, now let's address the papers that Audrey made up. Now, just for another brief reference, this is Lew White's book of Fossilized Testaments, which I would also say is very good. He has a different cover on it now. But on the back, my first exposure to this sort of stuff was from the back of Lew White's book. He tells you what things mean, but there's a couple little things which I would disagree with, based on my reference of doing other research. One is, he says that the ayin is the Greek equivalent of omega. Well, apparently that's not true. Apparently it's omicron, and that the omega comes at the end. But when I first saw this, I thought, wait a second. I've always read that Jesus said, I'm the Alpha and Omega. That's the first and the last. But the omega is not last. It's somewhere up here at the equivalent of our letter O, which is just past the middle. So, so I read this and it's like, things don't line up. And because things don't line up upon my study of these things, it has compelled me to look closer and try to find what sense to make out of all this. For some reason, I've just felt compelled to try to make sense of this. So when you find something like that, and you take this for granted, that, well, he's researched it, he knows what he's talking about, the omega is the I. Not so. Now, for me to disagree with Lew, maybe it was a typo, maybe he didn't realize it, maybe he didn't know about Omicron, but I've looked at a whole bunch of other lists, and omega is always at the end, and they've got more letters than just the 22. That's a whole other story. The other thing here, he has kaf is a bent hand, and that yod equals hand. Well, from my research, kaf is an open hand, and that yod is shaped like this, which is basically a hand grabbing a tool, but it has this Z-shaped lever sort of action. So the bending action is more the yod. The kaf is the open palm. Now, you could say, well, what's the big deal? If you don't care, it doesn't matter. But if you start to scrutinize why each letter is used, again, it's a huge deal. Pretty much everything else I have no disagreement about here. However, here's something interesting. Now tell me if you can get a feeling of a story here. I'm going to try to make a point. I'm going to read the words of Lew White's alphabet, and I do not disagree that that's what the letters can mean. But anybody raise your hand if you can get a feeling for what story these letters tell. Ox, house, camel, door, window, hook, weapon, fence, winding, hand, bet hand, goad, water, fish, crop, eye, mouth, hook, needle eye, head, tooth, mark. Anybody get a sense of a story of an understanding out of that? Let me go through it again. Because this is, if you look at 100 different lists of what these letters mean, this is your basic meaning that you're going to get. This is, I think, the benefit of what Daniel did in changing to this letter style, because remember, he was told by Yahweh's angel, Daniel, the power is put into your hand to hide the words and seal the book. And again, we'll get into the meaning of the words hide and seal and book until the time of the end. So the fact, if you can get anything out of this, or if you can't get anything out of it, good job, Daniel. He did what he was told. Ox, house, camel, door, window, nail, weapon, fence, snake, hand, bent hand, shepherd's goat or shepherd's staff, water, fish, winding or prop, eye, mouth, hunter or fish hook, sun on the horizon, head, teeth or fire, mark. Anybody understand the message? Here's another great book if you want to learn this stuff. It's by Frank Seekins, Hebrew Word Pictures. Random page here. He goes through, here's Zadi. He says Zadi means a fish hook. He shows you a couple ancient forms. The modern form says how the word is used in various scriptures and shows you like a fish hook, a Proto-Canaanite, early Hebrew Phoenician, King David's era, Daniel's era, Dead Sea Scrolls, early Aramaic in the time of Yeshua. And then he shows you the Phoenician Hebrew and how it blended into Syriac and Arabic. Here's another one, the Tav, cross, King David, Daniel, Yeshua's time, marker or sign. Shows you various uses. Here's a het, fence, these various different formats. It's very helpful to get a basic understanding. But it won't tell you a whole lot more than what we just went through. Now, just for what it's worth, these modern Hebrew letters, I've seen some people write so fast because they're so fluid. Like in English, you could have thousands of different fonts of English letters. So I've seen Hebrew, people write Hebrew, there's Aleph, there's excuse me, that's Palef. Bet would be, and a Gimel, Dalet, these are basic shapes. I was reading in one book how it talked about the design of the yod is very significant. The design of the yod, it starts from nothing, becomes something, lives its life, and disappears again. Like it talks about a man's life is like the flower that quickly fades, like a piece of grass, like a puff of wind. It's there, a puff of smoke is there, and then it's gone. That shape of the letter yod is the epitome in the most simplest form of that concept. That's pretty profound. That's incredible. Great job, Daniel. If that's the shape that he came up with, and he took that particular letter, you might say, well, why would Daniel choose that shape for that letter? I mean, this shape could have been for that letter, or that shape for that letter. I mean, why that? Where do they come up with these shapes? There's a certain book, let me see if I have a picture of it here. Well, we can look at it. We can look at it later. I have it. I brought it, but I can't remember the guy's name. Lawrence something. He wrote about the mystical shapes of the modern Hebrew letters, and they'll take every single. For example, they'll take every single letter. He said that the letter Hey. He said, well, that's a dalet plus a yod. And so he then talks about the significance of the fact that the letter He is a combination, because he said a yod is simply, if you take a pen and touch it to a paper, that's a yod. The smallest mark that anything can make once it's there. And so he goes into the significance of the shapes of the modern letters and elaborating on their incredible form. Again, it's probably all true. However, for the sake of the paleo, if you look at Frank Seeken's book, you'll see that there's Canaanite, Proto-Canaanite, Dead Sea Scroll era, some inscriptions they found at the Pool of Siloam, the King David era. Apparently the first half of the book of Daniel they found written in Paleo, and the second half of Daniel they found written in modern. You could say, well, why is that? I don't know who was responsible for that, but the point is there's all these various types of the Paleo. So what I did here is I took everything I could find regarding the Paleo from Frank Seekens and others, and I tried to find whatever shape was the simplest and purest shape which captured the concept. So within this array, some of these letters, according to Frank Seekens, will be from one era and some from another. But I can't prove to you that anything they found carved on a rock wasn't some graffiti from some teenage kid like you might find spray painted on the side of a boxcar. It doesn't mean it was the official font. Or it might be some, I think there was one that they said was apparently some school person, like a person who was learning to be a scribe, was scratching out on a rock practicing his penmanship or his carvingmanship, you know. And so what I'm saying is that there's no way to legitimize the official font of the Paleo. There's a place, and I believe it's Ecclesiastes, where Solomon said that he put his hand to studying science and art and music and botany and letters. And I would think that maybe what Solomon did, based on what I saw, read what he said there, that he, being the wisest man, compiled, you might say, and standardized perhaps a Paleo font. Now, if he did that, maybe at that time there came one that was more in tendency to be used. But so anyway, what I've got here, just so you know, you won't find this particular font anywhere else. It's not Frank Seekens stuff. As a matter of fact, here is a picture that Frank Seekens put out. He actually sent this card around in Monty Judah's, one of his recent news magazines. So here's Frank Seekens' shapes. For example, excuse me, not Frank Seekens, Jeff Benner. Jeff Benner's got a great website. I don't have the internet, I don't have the website, so I'm not aware of all this stuff. But other people have read it and said he's got some wonderful things. I'm not knocking the guy at all, but this is his design. So his Aleph looks like an ox head. His Bet, his Gimel, his Dalet, his Hay, his Zion, his Het, so forth. Now, what I don't like about Jeff Benner's, though they're actual, he found those actual types of letters somewhere archaeologically. I personally find them disturbing. I just don't like them. I don't even like looking at them. They just bug the heck out of me. This is a legitimate style, and I can see here the ears, the horns, the nose of the ox head. I can see here the shape of a tent, in that, as a bet, you could say, well, from what I understand, if you look at the floor plan of a tent, say a Bedouin tent maybe, they have one section, say this is the floor plan, right? So the walls would, if drawn at 3D, would kind of go up like this.